This happened in June 2015. Myself, my boyfriend, and my sister decided to go stay the weekend inside Yellowstone National Park. Spend the day hiking and exploring, taking in the sights. We found a great clearing at the edge of the woods to make camp and set up our tent. It started to get dark out, so I made a fire, and we were just sitting around, listening, drinking, telling stories, just having a good time. Not too far off in the distance, we started to hear whistling, like somebody whistling and just wandering around. You probably think I'm crazy for thinking this odd, but this was like 1:30 in the morning. Pitch black in those woods, and could see no flashlight, no light source whatsoever. So whoever this was just wandering around in the dead of night whistling to themselves. To me that was very creepy. And the whistling was getting louder and closer to our campsite. I woke my boyfriend up and my sister because the whistling was getting very close to our camp. My boyfriend stepped out of the tent to see if he could tell what direction it was coming from and how close to our tent it was. Suddenly it just stopped. No sound, no movement, silence. So we figured this person must have left, and my boyfriend came back into the tent and we went to sleep. I suddenly awoke with an awful feeling, like something was wrong, like the feeling of being watched. My hair stood up on the back of my neck. That's when I heard it. Someone moving right outside our tent. They were being very quiet, but I could make out the sound of leaves beneath their feet. And then, like the beginning to some horror movie, I heard it. The whistling. Right outside our tent. They were walking around our campsite whistling. The same whistling I heard in the forest. I shook my boyfriend awake, and we sat there in silence hoping whoever this was would leave. It felt like a lifetime, but finally we could hear them making their way out of our campsite and back into the woods. We didn't wait till morning. I woke my sister, we backed up our shit, and we got the hell out of there. Who just walks around in the dead of night whistling and intruding on people's campsites? Fucking creepy. I have to share this story because it's one of the strangest and most bizarre stories I've ever heard. This happened a long time ago, I believe in the 1800s. A boy, we will call him Dennis, was fishing in a lake in the woods not too far from his parents' house. He was 9 years old. While fishing, Dennis was approached by a man who decided to join Dennis fishing and was actually very friendly and invited Dennis back to his cabin to have supper with his family. Dennis was starving and had not caught anything, and the man seemed friendly enough, so Dennis decided to go. Now remember, this is a different time period. This sort of thing was more common. Dennis makes it back to the man's cabin and is relieved upon entering the cabin to see many people, including someone he recognizes, a family friend of his dad's. Dennis was much more relaxed and at ease after this and enjoyed dinner with everyone. They all seemed extremely nice and Dennis was having a great time. After supper, Dennis fell asleep for a bit on the couch and woke up as the sun was setting. He knew he needed to get home because his parents would be worried sick about him. So the man that Dennis had met at the lake helped him gather himself and walked him outside and showed him the trail to take back to the lake so he could go home. He hugged the man, thanked him for his hospitality, and started making his way up the trail. As Dennis was making his way along the trail, he turned one last time to wave goodbye and thank the man, and that's when everything changed. The cabin was gone. The man was gone. The trail was gone, and Dennis was suddenly lost in the middle of the woods, no idea where he was or what had just happened. It was dark now, and Dennis was very confused and upset. He could hear someone calling his name not too far off. He recognized it as being his dad. He ran to it and found his dad frantically running to his son, visibly upset. The dad said he had been looking for his son for 2 days, and asked what had happened. 2 days, Dennis thought. I've only been gone for a few hours. Another man appeared alongside his father. It was the same man that Dennis had seen at the cabin that made him at ease to be there. Same family friend of his dad's. He asked the man, "Don't you remember we ate dinner at the cabin in the woods? You were there." The man looked confused. He said he had been with his father looking for him for the last 2 days. Dennis had no idea what to make of this. Deep in the woods, the father said they had been searching and the only sound they heard were Native American drums, or what sounded like Native American drums coming from the forest, but they could never figure out exactly where they came from. The story is deeply disturbing and has never been explained. In 1868, a 3-year-old girl disappeared from her father's lumber camp in northern Michigan. After enlisting the help of a pair of professional hunters, who happened on the hysterical search scene by chance, the men traced the little girl's feeble cries to a dead stand of brush. When the men advanced on the thicket, they saw what they said looked like a giant bear burst from it and run across the river, heading for the distant horizon. The men returned with the girl unharmed from the brush. She later told them that Mr. Wolf would not let her leave and had eaten her hat right off of her head, although he had also gathered berries and fed them to her. On the night of July 2, 1955, Mrs. Curtis, summoned by her distraught older children, arrived just in time to see what she and the children said was a huge bear cradling her 2-year-old daughter, Ida Mae Curtis, in its front paw as it scurried off on 3 legs from their tent in a lumber camp at the wild Kootenai National Forest in Montana. On July 4th, after a search by 350 backwoodsmen in heavy rain, Ida was found dry and safe in a crudely built shelter across a river, just 300 yards away from where she was taken. Ida would later relate to the best of a 2-year-old's ability, being cuddled and comforted by the bear during the time she was missing. The sheriff became so angry that he actually paid the Curtises 3 separate visits, demanding they stop telling their story of a bear abducting and caring for their little girl. He told them, "Quit telling that story. It could never happen. It didn't happen, and don't say it anymore."